Hey there, friends. I have a really interesting story to share with you guys today. You might remember a story from a couple days ago where Mike from Mr. Guns and Gear put a story out about a Navy guy who had had some of his firearms and accessories stolen from him by the ATF and likely won't get them back. And the guy was innocent. He just got caught up, kind of a wrong place at the wrong time type of thing. Well, after listening to Mike's video, it perplexed me because there were so many questions that I still had. So I reached out to Mike, and Mike put me in touch with Carlo, the guy who this happened to. And I appreciate that, Mike, for doing that, Mr. Guns and Gear. So I spoke to Carlo at length yesterday, and I've gotten a ton of information from him because, as you guys know from my videos, I like to assemble a very detailed, in-depth story if I'm going to put something out there. The guy this story centers around's name is Carlo. Carlo was in the Navy for 20 years. Carlo is a Filipino immigrant, came over when he was 19 to the United States, became a U.S. citizen, very proud of his U.S. citizenry, and again joined the Navy rather, and retired from the Navy a month or so ago. Spent 20 years in there. While in the Navy, he had a side gig, a side job as an artist. The guy's a gifted artist. You'll see some of his drawings and some of his creations here. Does different types of artistry and artwork for video games, apps, and things like that. Makes a pretty good living on the side doing that. He didn't give me any numbers, but I would imagine it probably rivals what he makes with the Navy. So spending 20 years in the Navy, has a wife and a son the same age as my son, by the way. Zero criminal record, proud to be an American. This guy served his country and respects his country and is very proud of the fact that he came here the right way, did everything the right way, and is essentially the American dream, a success story. But he's also a gun guy, and that's where apparently he runs afoul with the government because he got caught up in something he should not have gotten caught up in. There's a guy in Memphis, Tennessee that he knows that has a local shop there in Memphis, Tennessee. The guy's name is Ferris. Ferris has essentially what you would call kind of a warehouse distribution of secondhand goods, like items that are returned to Amazon, for instance. He buys them in bulk and puts them in his store, his brick and mortar store, and sells them to people at a reduced rate. So you get pretty good products, I assume, at a decent rate versus what you would pay full price for them in a retail outlet or on Amazon. That's how Carlo knows Ferris. Ferris was actually purchasing firearms from people privately and selling them privately, not in his store, privately. He would sell accessories, gun accessories that were legal in his store. I'm talking about buffer tubes and things like that. But he wasn't selling any serialized items in there. He did not have his FFL yet, which, by the way, he was in the process of getting his FFL when all this went down. But however, he was not selling serialized things from the location, just gun parts. And that's how Carlo knows him. Carlo went to meet him to get a buffer tube to complete a build that he was working on. When he pulls up over there, he pulls up in his Tesla because remember, he's an artist making good money on the side. He can afford nice things, not just on his Navy salary. He pulls up and Ferris is a little bit paranoid and Carlo picks up on that. Kind of one of those situations where he knows something's not right or suspects that something's not right, and he asks Ferris. Ferris pretty much tells him, I see unmarked cars, a couple that have circled around here a couple of times, and I think I recognize some of the guys. So Ferris thinks that somebody is surveying him at that point, and I guess the hair's on the back of his neck. He's suspecting something is going down. Well, rather than leave, Carlo just kind of talks to him for a moment, and then they're not wanting to go into the store to get the buffer tube and whatever other parts, just parts that Carlo wants. And all of a sudden, Ferris changes his mind and says, well, let's go inside and do it. They go inside the building after having that weird suspicion outside, and they spend 40 minutes inside the building just BSing and getting the things that Carlo wanted and paying for them, of course. They walk outside, and they're kind of shooting the bull a little bit, and they walk up to Carlo's vehicle, which again is the Tesla. It has the front trunk lid. He pops the front trunk lid to put the items into the front trunk lid that he just purchased. And he said out of nowhere, 20 ATF agents popped up. They come out, you can see the diagram here where their vehicles are parked, how they're parked. And again, 20 guys. Now this 20 guys, that doesn't just happen on a whim. You don't just mobilize 20 guys with a phone call or a text to somebody, a group text. This is something that had to have been planned out, and they were expecting to do this. Now, where it gets iffy is that they separate the two guys, Ferris and Carlo, on the scene and start questioning them. Now, they're kind of rough with Ferris because Ferris was evidently the main guy they were looking at. A little bit of quick backstory. There appears to have been somebody in the Memphis, Tennessee area who was selling solvent traps and force reset triggers and things like that the ATF deemed illegal, and was selling them to various people in the area. And Ferris actually was on their radar screen because he had sold a force reset trigger, 4 or 5 of them previously. So he was kind of on their radar screen. So they were kind of looking for the source. And for some reason, I guess because Carlo had a nice vehicle and had nice things, they assumed whenever they came on to the two guys that possibly Carlo was the supplier, supplying Ferris with the illegal items, according to the ATF. Well, after questioning Carlo, they realized that, okay, we've got a 20-year Navy vet here. The guy's about to retire, has no criminal record, has a wife and a kid, and has a side job that's allowed him to pay for the Tesla. That's not a Navy paid for Tesla. He paid for it out of his own pocket. And oh, by the way, he has this trunk open on his Tesla where they can see inside of it, and they see these really nice firearms that he has in there. 2 rifles and an upper. Decked out, loaded, $25,000 worth of stuff. Now, you know that the ATF, other than confiscating and stealing things, they've never laid their hands on something that nice before. So they're oohing and eyeing over all that, and they're actually even taking selfies with this guy's guns next to his car, throwing up gang signs and things like that. This is all stuff that, unfortunately, we don't have video of, because while we do have a lot of video of the surrounding area, because Carlo has a Tesla and the Tesla has 360-degree filming at various times, which it was filming the entire time. All this was being videotaped. With the hood up, the front camera is actually in the windshield area, so the hood is blocking any of this with these guys taking selfies and whatnot. I don't think the ATF guys know that, because I'm sure most of them don't have any kind of experience with a Tesla. They got lucky that hood was up while they were taking all their selfies and oohing, eyeing over the firearms. At this point, I think they kind of realized, the ATF agents, that Carlo is not their guy. In the meantime, they're roughing up Ferris over there pretty good. They have him on the ground in handcuffs. Now, they've also got Carlo in handcuffs. A couple of hours went by with this man in handcuffs. Now, remember, he is an artist, and actually now, by trade, because he's retired, that's all he does. That is his primary source of income, is an artist. They've got this guy in handcuffs. Side note here, they actually damaged his hand. His hand is hurt right now, and that's how he makes his living, not to mention the trauma and everything else that he went through. Remember, guys, this is a Filipino immigrant that has no reason to think that he's done anything wrong. So he's somewhat mentally traumatized right now, because this is not something he ever expected to experience. Later on, they actually asked to search the vehicle, and when he refused to let them search the vehicle, they immediately accused him of having dope in it. Oh, you must have dope inside the car. Now, while they were questioning him about possibly being the supplier of the illegal SBRs, according to them, and some of the other items, solvent traps and whatnot, they actually were asking him how he got there. Now, remember, they're thinking they're right at this point. Well, Carlo blows their whole story out of the water, because he even says, I actually have correspondence that can prove to you that this is why I came here today. Well, they had a warrant for the Facebook account for Ferris. Now, they didn't have any warrants on Carlo because they didn't know who Carlo was. So they couldn't access his Facebook. But they actually went over to Ferris's Facebook, got his phone, looked at his Facebook, and were able to even verify that this was why they were there, and could see the full message distribution between the two, and as to corroborate the story that Carlo was telling them, that, look, this is why I'm here. They even were able to look at all that and still determine that this man, Carlo, was not there illegally, and that the conversation, unless there's some kind of code word for buffer tube that means SBR or solvent trap, that somehow or another they were wrong about all this, and were still assuming that Carlo might be the guy, even though they knew better, according to the Facebook. Now, the agents asked Carlo if he legally owned and possessed everything that he had. And of course he does. And he told them, yeah, I have all my paperwork and everything. I have everything you would need to show that all these items are legit. and they asked him, looking at his high dollar Surefire and other suppressors that he had, if these were homemade suppressors. Now, these are ATF agents. An ATF agent should, with a glimpse of an eye, know if something is homemade, a solvent trap or something that is commercially manufactured to be sold on the retail market. Yet they still push Carlo, asking him if these items were homemade or not. Nice work if those are homemade, by the way. Now, according to Carlo, up to this point when he refused to let them search his vehicle, they were somewhat cordial. Now, they're sitting here beating up the guy practically, got him on the ground and twisting his arm and asking him all kinds of questions. And for the other guy, Ferris, but they're relatively polite to Carlo. Again, I think on the scene, they believed that Carlo was what he was, an innocent bystander, just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, of course, once Carlo wouldn't let them search his vehicle, their tune changed. They got upset with him, and they actually, at that point, determined that they were going to take, confiscate, seize, whatever term you would like to use. They all mean the same thing. So they advised him that they were going to steal his weapons. And they did, in fact, steal everything that he had there. You see the numbers here that I have, the dollar figures I got from Carlo directly that show what not only the firearms he had, but all the pricey accessories that he had, totaling over $25,000. They stole this stuff. They took it from this man. A few days later, Carlo contacts the office and says, hey, where's my stuff? You know, what's going on? Are there charges pressed against me? Do I have any charges against me? No response through email or phone, and finally he goes up to the location and he's filming with his GoPro, and he finally gets to talk to somebody. Now, the lead investigator is not the lead agent is not the one who would talk to him. She's not available for whatever reason, so they send 3 guys down to try to rough him up and bully him. As you can see, he's got a GoPro going, and his wife is there with him while they try to condescendingly speak to him and make him feel like he is less than what they are. At one point, they ask for paperwork for his SBR, at which point he says, I don't have an SBR. None of those were SBRs. That was an upper that you took. It was not, according to the ATF, according to you guys, that's not a firearm. And it wasn't. I mean, as you can see the configuration here, it's just the upper. And they said, no, when we took it from you, it was in an SBR configuration. He's like, no, it was not. Carlo then asked about body cam footage to confirm and corroborate that. And they said that nobody was wearing body cams at the time. Go figure, right? Now, Carlo made the comment to them and to later on the lead agent that he had physical evidence, and I don't know what this evidence is, but he had physical evidence that could prove to them that the upper that he had, which was not an SBR, that it was not in an SBR configuration and was not a fireable firearm at that time. In other words, it did not have a lower receiver attached to it. I don't know what that proof is. I don't know what that evidence is that he has. And I don't really want to know. Because at this point, however he's protecting that, he's doing it for a reason. And it's so that somebody else does not seek that out, take that from him, do some kind of a surprise little visit to his home one night, and somehow or another wander off with something else. Because remember, again, no body cams on these guys. So they're doing whatever they want and not having any of it documented. Now, for a little bit of clarity, they were not investigating Ferris necessarily for SBRs and FRTs or anything like that. There's a long backstory that I'm not going to get into because I don't think it's relevant at this point, but they were investigating him for potentially using a business loan to purchase firearms. Apparently that's illegal. I don't know. I don't know enough about that. I'm not an attorney, but that's why they were investigating the guy. That's why they had their, if you want to call it, probable cause. Now, a quick side note, during all of this, Carlo's sister, who lived in Washington State, you'll remember Washington State had just passed a law this year limiting magazine capacity to only 10 rounds. His sister lived up there. His sister was attacked during an armed robbery during this whole process over the last couple of months. She was attacked by 3 armed robbers. Now, she was carrying a firearm on her, but she had the mandated 10 rounds. She lost that firefight, and she also lost her life, because she only had 10 rounds and she was fighting 3 people who had firearms and more than 10 rounds. So we can see the little side story here and the subplot of how these anti-gun laws are costing people's lives. Now, at some point, Carlo finally got in touch with the lead agent. She contacted him and she let him know, look, quit blowing my phone up. You're blowing my phone up. She said, you don't even have charges and you're blowing my phone up, but that could change if you keep calling me. She literally threatened him with charges if he continued to call inquiring about his $25,000 worth of merchandise that they had stolen from him. Remember, this man has no charges against him, yet they're holding his $25,000 worth of stuff. And look, we've all seen the stories of ATF agents and contractors that are rifling through the ATF agents' buildings. Between those two, they are selling on the black market so many of these confiscated items that they say that they are destroying, which they're destroying a small percentage of them and selling illegally the rest of them. There's a very good chance that the firearms that they stole from Carlos are already gone. My guess is they're nowhere to be found, and that's probably part of the reason why. They probably assumed that this guy will just back off and leave us alone and not question anything. We're just going to take his stuff. The stuff has probably been distributed to different people as attaboys, and now all of a sudden they can't produce it. And this guy is calling them on it, Carlo is, and saying, I want my stuff back. My guess is they can't produce that stuff because it's already gone. It's been distributed amongst them. Now, when Carlo mentioned to the lead agent telling her about his sister being murdered, that he needed his firearms for her home protection, she made the comment to him, and here is your registration confirmation that we know what you've got. We know you have other stuff. She acknowledged to him that they knew that he had other weapons, so why did he need the ones that they were holding illegally? She even made the statement to him that I don't know who you think is going to invade your house because you don't need 30 rounds. This is an ATF agent telling an American, an honest, law-abiding American, why she thinks he doesn't need X amount of rounds in his firearm. Now, I would also like to point out, from a character standpoint, the type of people that we're dealing with. We also have this lead agent here who, we have the records here, is a DWI person. She's a drunk driver, on record being a drunk driver. She clearly has poor judgment and can't make good decisions and likes the sauce a little bit and doesn't mind going out there and partaking in it and still getting behind the wheel. That's who your lead agent is here. I realize this is government. That's probably grounds for a promotion with the federal government rather than a demotion that we see in many, many cases. Now, I'd like to point out, since then, Ferris has lost his business. He's lost his home. He's lost his family because he's gotten eviction notices. He cannot pay anything because he has no revenue source anymore. The ATF has destroyed this one man's life. And again, I don't know if he was doing anything illegal, but everything that I have heard and everything that I've seen and everything I've investigated shows that this guy Ferris was doing everything by the book. It was just suspicions of doing something's wrong or suspicions of being involved in something that was an illegal activity, and they have ruined this man's life. And it looks like they're trying to ruin Carlo's life as well. The thing is, they don't even have anything that they can kind of twist to make it look like this man was doing something. Carlo was doing something illegal. It seems like the one grain of thing they're trying to hold on to is to try to pin some kind of an SBR thing on him to somehow scare him into thinking we got something on you, because they know the man knows better. The thing about these SBR charges, and in fact, the attorney for Carlo told him the same thing. In many cases, they'll throw this SBR charge at a person, the ATF will. They'll throw the charge at somebody knowing full well that there is no SBR involved, knowing that they're going to drop that charge. In other words, it gives them additional charges, or in this case, it gives them the only charge in order to bully this person, in order to try to convince them that, yeah, we'll drop the SBR charge if you either tell us this or you leave us alone. Guys, I'm very much concerned with this. This is one of those stories that you hate to hear because you know what happens and you know what goes on. But whenever you hear about it and you hear about it at this level of detail, I spent hours on the phone with Carlo last night. This level of detail is scary to me because what you have is you have bloated egos involved. It appears from the outside looking in that you have the ATF who thought they had something and they thought they had someone. They went through the motions, the things that you can't back up, the things you can't put the toothpaste back in the toothpaste thing. They did all this stuff, and then it was one of those, oh crap, this guy's not our guy. We got nothing on this guy. And then the ego, when he says, you can't search my vehicle, now they get mad. Because they like to be the bullies. They like to be the ones in control and in charge all the time. And all of a sudden, they weren't in charge. And they didn't like that. But because they're still controlling the situation with intimidation, they still act like they have control. Unfortunately, for the people there, like Carlo, he gets swept up in all this. And I truly believe, back at the station, this is one of those oh crap moments. I truly believe that these ATF agents are like, that they honestly believe and know, I mean, they were there, 20 of them, that Carlo is an innocent man. And after doing a background check on him, a check with the Navy, which, by the way, he told all of his superiors about what happened so that everybody knows, so they can't blackmail him or whatever to try to get him in trouble. Out of all this, all the checking on Carlo, they definitely know by now that the guy is legit, that he is not a criminal. And now they are sitting on $25,000 worth of his legally purchased merchandise, and it looks like they have no intention of giving it back. So they're stuck. So at this point, I intend to do everything I can to try to help this man out, because this is not right. And once this happens to this guy, then it happens to the next guy, then the next guy, then the next guy. It continues to happen until somebody puts a stop to it. Luckily, there's a guy like Carlo who is speaking up, because how many of these things happen out there where people are so intimidated and so scared because the ATF says, if you just shut up, we'll let it go. So they keep your weapons, you shut up, they don't ever press charges against you because you've never done anything wrong. So they have stolen your property, they're never giving it back, you are scared, you never know if that knock on the door is going to come, you never know if you're going to get hauled off to jail in front of your wife and your kids, like in Carlo's case. You never know that. That's the intimidation tactics that is happening with the federal government right now, and it seems like at every level of every single agency. I will keep you guys updated on Carlo's story, but this is a very upsetting and disturbing story, I have to say.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America. He's so horrible.